Hey, y'all, and welcome to another episode of Countdown to Election Week. Today we have with us Diana Gomez, Ed Espinoza, and Wesley Story. One of the cool trends in this year's election is the amount of new voters turning out. Young, old alike, they're just really amped up. And so I thought it'd be fun to figure out who did each of us vote for in our first election. Ed, I'm guessing yours might be Abraham Lincoln, but if I'm wrong, definitely correct me. For myself, it was Barack Obama in 2008. But Diana, how about yourself?
It was the same. It was Barack Obama. That was the very first time I could vote. I was galvanized by the Yes We Can that originated from the Si Se Puede. So I just related to it so much. And in Hays County, that was my first vote.
Amazing. Wesley, what about yourself?
So my first election that I was able to vote in was in 2016 in the primaries, and I voted for Bernie Sanders, actually. So
my first election was a long time ago. I was living out in LA County, where I grew up, out in Los Angeles, and I voted for Jerry Brown for president in 1992.
That's the year Clinton became president, right?
What's that?
That's the year Clinton won eventually?
Eventually it was the year that Clinton was the nominee. I think I might have voted for Perot in the general election. I was young, I needed the money. But the Jerry Brown vote, he used to be governor of California, and he was well known there, and he was well out of the race by the time the June primary had shown up that year. But I still voted for old Edmund Jerry Brown that year.
Well, that's good. You got that California pride. I love it. Yeah. So today, what we're thinking about is, elections are part of a narrative. And often we focus on the narrative of that election. But in Texas, it's a little bit different. Over the course of the past couple of years, we've gone from a deep red state to today, one of the biggest battleground states in the U.S. And Ed, I know you have a lot of interesting insights on this. Do you want to talk to how this shift occurred?
Yeah, so one of the things we like to say about Texas is that it's not a red state, it's a non-voting state. And the thing is that we have this great big state that has some of the lowest voter turnout in America. And in years past, that lowest voter turnout has hovered somewhere between 45th and 50th or 51st if you factor in DC. And it's been it's fluctuated around there. But that hasn't really been the case in 2018, and it doesn't appear to be the case in 2020. People have started, as the state has grown and more people have moved into the state, and a lot of our younger people have turned 18 and started becoming eligible to vote, the voter turnout has increased. And, a lot of people are paying attention to Texas right now, and they're seeing that Biden has led in some polls. But the thing is that this goes back a couple of years. You can go back to 2018, where Democrats picked up 12 seats in the legislature, 2 seats in the state Senate, and 2 seats in Congress. But you can also go back to 2016 when Democrats picked up 5 seats in the legislature, and Hillary Clinton improved her presidential performance in the state for a Democrat by more than 500,000 votes. So this has been happening over the last 2 election cycles. And even before that, just a lot of progressive infrastructure has built in this state. So what people are seeing, it didn't happen overnight. It certainly didn't happen all of a sudden. There's a lot of long-term work has gone into the state, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so what you're seeing right now is the product of that sustained infrastructure in Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Though, you know what, I got to say, when folks from out of town ask me how it's going, I kind of take credit myself for what's happening. I'm like, I moved here, things changed, it's all good. Even if we don't win at the top of the ballot, one important outcome could be flipping the Texas House. Wesley, do you want to talk a little bit about what that could look like?
Yeah, so I think that's something that's really important, is that a lot of people are focused on the presidency. And, if we flip Texas, then Joe Biden wins. But there are a lot of different ways that Texas can flip in this election, and it's all the way up and down the ballot. And so the presidency, while it's important, it's not the only focus, and it's not the only thing we should be talking about. So as you mentioned, one of the other ways that we can flip Texas this year is that we can flip the Texas House. And that would have huge implications for the next decade of Texas politics, specifically in the 2021 Texas legislative session, because the Texas House is going to be redrawing our legislative districts. And so what that means is if Republicans have control of the Texas House, they'll be free to gerrymander the Texas districts and make it harder for people to vote and make it harder for people to really have true representation. But if we have Democrats in the Texas House who are in control of the process, then they can ensure a more equitable process for redrawing the districts. And so that could have huge implications for future elections and getting people elected, progressives elected up and down the ballot. A Democratic House could mean, again, better legislation, better policies, especially with COVID right now. We can expand Medicaid. We can really help hold police accountable, use the rainy day fund for Texans and not corporations and wealthy donors. So there's a lot of different things that can happen if we flip the Texas House, and that's something that I think needs to get a little bit more attention. Going back to what you were mentioning before, Satvik, about how you moved to Texas and things are starting to change. I think that's also something, speaking to Ed's point on, this has been a long time coming and Texas has been changing for a while now. A lot of people might credit it to Texas has seen a lot of growth. A lot of people have been moving from out of the state into the state. And while that's part of it, there's also the point of young voters and Latinx voters and voters of color who have been getting out and voting in this election. And so I think we need to put credit where it's due. It's not just on the people who are moving to Texas and maybe making us more progressive. Texas was progressive already. It's about people who are finally feeling like they can get out and vote and use their voices and are actually being empowered to take part in the democratic process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diana, you do a lot of work with our partners. What is this like new voter surge looking like on the ground and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. Like Wesley mentioned, there is a changing face of the growing demographic of voters here. Speaking specifically to Latinx voters, there are so many, and this is a huge pool of voters, so many Latinx voters turning 18 every day. And they're a huge part of that. And when we talk about the influence of Latinx folks in politics, it's not only about the voters, but it's also the folks running for office, like we're mentioning before, running for Texas House. And we had the chance to interview a lot of them too here on Progress Texas. If any folks want to go back and hear what they said, I moderated a conversation on the state of Latinx politics in Texas, and we had some really great folks running for the Texas House. Natalie Hurtado, Eric Holguin. We've also interviewed Lorenzo Sanchez, and there are other folks running for office too. So the face of Texas is changing, and it's so diverse. And the people who are running for those offices need to represent that diversity as well. And there's so many great candidates that we can vote for to represent that diversity and flip the Texas House as well. Candace Valenzuela, for example, would be the very first Afro-Latina, in not in the House, but for Congress. So we just have so many chances out there. And also speaking to what this could mean to flip the House is that, a lot of our partners work in the abortion world and in reproductive rights. So for a lot of folks who are feeling super anxious right now about the change that has happened with the Supreme Court, we have another chance to fight for reproductive rights with the Texas House. Flipping it, we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something, Ed, that we talked about a couple of days ago is that it's not just about SCOTUS. There's another big Supreme Court here in Texas that could handle a lot of these issues. Do you mind weighing in on that for a second?
Yeah, so the Texas Supreme Court, which is actually an elected body, has 9 justices on it, and we have 4 that are up this election cycle. We've got 4 good Democrats running, and that's right now. There's 9 justices. Help me out here, Wesley. It's 9 justices, right? I asked.
Yeah,
I had my math wrong on that last week, so I want to make sure that I'm consistent here. But they're all Republicans. Many of them got their position by being appointed. Now, there is this gamesmanship that takes place on the court, where when a justice is about to retire, they'll retire past the deadline for a special election so that a Republican governor can appoint a new successor. So there's a lot of the current court initially got there by way of appointment. In fact, Wesley, you may know this answer, but like, how many of the 9 justices originally got there by way of appointment? Do you know the answer to that?
So I don't know the answer to that exactly, but on this point of kind of, I don't know if you would call it corruption or, like you said, political gamesmanship, but on this point, there's also right now, Governor Abbott is funding a lot of ads to try to get Republicans reelected up and down the ballot. And one of the ads that's been going around is an ad encouraging people to vote for the 4 Republicans who are up for reelection on the Texas Supreme Court. And just kind of a conflict of interest when you think about it, because there's a lot of different lawsuits happening right now against the governor because of some of the election issues that we've been experiencing. So for example, the Texas Supreme Court recently ruled in favor of Governor Abbott and his decision to restrict the mail-in ballot drop-off locations. And at the same time, he's funding a lot of advertisements for their campaigns and for them getting reelected. So you can kind of see that, how there's a conflict there and the way that they kind of tie into each other. So I'm not exactly sure how many have been appointed and how many Governor Abbott, I mean, we know of one. One of them has been appointed just recently because there was a retirement, but I'm not sure how many have been appointed by Republican governors.
Yeah. So as you can see, everyone, there's a lot at stake in this election. It's not just who becomes the president, but it's also the Texas Supreme Court, the Texas House, the School Board of Education. And here's the thing. We're doing a good job turning voters out. And earlier today, we talked about, early vote ends on Friday.
Well, before we move on, let's mention the Democrats who are running for the Supreme Court. We talked about the problems. We talked about the Supreme Court. I do want to be able to give some space to say that Amy Clark Meacham, who is running for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, great candidate from here in Travis County, is currently a judge and has been endorsed by the Hispanic Bar Association, the Texas AFL-CIO. She's on the ballot along with Kathy Cheng from Harris County. She's running. Gisela Triana, who is currently on the Court of Appeals, and then Stacey Williams, also running. 4 women running for 4 positions. They would change the face of the court in a very important way. And I hope that when people are going in to vote, that they're considering these candidates and voting for them as well, because they could not only make a big difference on the court, but make a big difference on our way of life here in Texas.
And also...
It's so amazing that they're all women and that most of them are women of color. That just sounds so amazing how the Democratic Party is becoming a lot more diverse, and what an amazing chance we have to make sure that the Supreme Court reflects that diversity too.
That's what I was going to mention too, Diana. And actually, a lot of them, there would be a lot of firsts with these candidates. So Amy Clark Meacham, if she's elected, she would be the first woman Supreme Court, Texas Supreme Court justice in our history. And then I believe that, so again, and Kathy Cheng, I believe she would be the first Asian American woman elected to the Texas Supreme Court as well. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as well, is what you were mentioning earlier, Diana, about the face of Texas is changing, and we need for the people who are holding power and who are in office to represent that changing demographic here in the state. Yeah.
So as I said, and Ed, thank you for bringing this in, because you're right. We shouldn't just say what we are against. We should say what we're for. And we're for, more progressive, a more diverse Supreme Court, a more diverse, progressive, just state leadership in general. So last thing before we sign off and we see you tomorrow at noon, Friday is the last day of early vote. And I forget if it was Ed or Wesley, you were saying that tomorrow's hours for polling locations might be different than usual. Can you speak a little bit to that really quick?
I don't remember which one of us brought it up, but I think that in some polling places, they're open till 9 o'clock. So normally they're required to stay open till 7. Some places have opened it up to stay later. Check your local polling place and make sure you know the hours when you go there. And also remember that if you are in line and you haven't voted, they have to stay open until you vote. They cannot shut the doors on you. It is against the law. And if you have a problem, you need to call 866-OUR-VOTE. And there are voting rights specialists available to help you right away.
Well, yeah, Ed, thanks for that. Everyone who came to watch, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be here tomorrow at 12 p.m. again with these beautiful people, and we'll be giving you some more updates on our countdown to election week. Have a great day. Go out and vote. Make sure your friends go out and vote. Make sure your family goes out to vote. We need every Texan to vote in this election so that we can flip the state. Have a good one. Bye, y'all.